for Daybreak News. Two questions. It seems that the degeneration of Glenlal's gray matter has caused him to be fixated on Tupui Group, a company that I'm affiliated with. Like if I'm the only contractor in Guyana. To put things into context, can you give the citizenry an understanding of the contracts out there, the kind of amounts dedicated to infrastructure development over the last few years, and like foreign companies, there are Trinidadian companies here, there are Chinese companies here, and most of the companies that garner the biggest quantities of money from contracts in infrastructure development are actually foreign companies. Can you give some context to that?
Yeah, well, you have a duty also to defend your own company, right? Because often when the government puts out this information, it's seen as defending corruption, and that is how they want it portrayed. Now, the question is, you mentioned about their foreign companies getting contracts. The contracts, if we utilize bilateral resources. In some cases, like Chinese resources, then you're required to hire a Chinese company. Particularly if you get concessional resources from China. So say for example, China Exim Bank would lend you at below 2% interest rate, but you're required to hire Chinese contract. So like on the East Coast Road, the 4-lane road from Mahaika to Sheriff Street, that is financed from a loan from China. And therefore a Chinese company won it through a competitive bid or a selective bid of only Chinese companies, because you couldn't include a non-Chinese company. It would fall outside of the scope of financing. That's one. Similar to the Indian company in the Ogle bypass. It's a combination of financing from the Indian government and part of it from the Guyana government. So there are contracts of that nature where the aid is tied. In cases where we finance loans from multilateral agencies, for example, the Islamic Development Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, World Bank, etc. The member states of those institutions are allowed to bid. So if you have an American company, the US is part of the Inter-American Development Bank, they can bid. The Chinese are part of it. So they can also bid. And in this case, they bid, and then we have to also seek a no objection from these institutions to award the contract after the bid process takes place and the evaluation is done. So, for example, paving and widening the East Bank Road from around the stadium area all the way to the airport. We're widening it in a small way, about 2 feet on both sides, and repaving the road outside of the work we're doing on the parallel road, the 4-lane road. That is financed from the Inter-American Development Bank. A Chinese contractor won that bid. So the one where for example, the Linden-Soesdijk Highway, which is financed from the Islamic Development Bank, again, you have contractors. So it's a joint venture between a Trinidad company and a Guyanese company that won that project. They were the most responsive. And we had to seek the no objection from the Islamic Development Bank. They do their own evaluation too. So if our evaluation differs from there's a problem. So then we seek the no objection. That's good. So On the gas to energy project, that went through a public bid. An American company won that, 700 and something $million. That is to build the power plant and the NGL facility. So these are some things that are happening. The bridge across the river, again, that was a public tender, but the contractors had to bring financing. So after the public tender, which was done by the government, the Chinese company won the bid, but we tied up a loan from China. So these are, many people believe that that's external. There are lots of projects being funded now by the budget. So all the village roads are being funded by the budget. All the village roads and the city, etc. We've said, as far as possible, our instructions are that we must stick, because we had complaints from Region 10 that there were contractors who were coming out from the region and getting work there. The instruction has been to have a competitive, clean process, but try to give preference in every one of the regions through the regional budget to regional contractors, so that we have a growth in the regional contractors. And like in Region 10 now, almost all the roads that we're doing, nearly $2 billion go to contractors from the region. Similarly in Berbice and other parts. We discovered only recently that Region 1 was not doing this, and I had a discussion with them, so they're shifted now. So you build regional capacity, and this is mainly for the small project. But there are lots of other. This 4-lane road is funded purely from the budget. So mostly Guyanese contractors are getting this now. But you need also to do a good quality project. So there are billions of dollars of projects to literally thousands of contractors in the country, thousands of contractors. That's why I'm saying the scale of what's happening is not represented. So we're spending on housing alone $200 billion we've spent. $200 billion from the time we got back to now. So when you look at one person getting a contract there for $1 billion, that's one or maybe $500 million. If you had to give everyone a $500 million contract in housing, you're talking about 400 different contractors that would have to work. Although there's some seems high, but it is, you have a lot of things being done right across the country. Now, you have to defend yourself. We're tightening up, and what we're planning to do, because we have this problem at the cabinet itself. When a paper goes to the cabinet, often the cabinet doesn't see all of the work that people have in different agencies. So we're now going to introduce a pre-qualification system, maybe starting from a threshold of say 50 million and above. So if you're pre-qualified to do work up to $500 million, and you get one contract and you're at $450 million, when they go to the cabinet paper goes there, it will say this contractor was pre-qualified for $500 million, already has a contract for $450 million. Therefore, the cabinet will say immediately, you can't give another contract for 200 or 300 million because they have reached their capacity. And so that is what we're starting to introduce now, a countrywide, you're going to see more about it, a countrywide pre-qualification system that will match capacity, and then all of the agencies of the government will have to report to the center or through a website about work that people have everywhere, so that the cabinet, the government could have a full picture, that because you don't know if a man is working for multiple ministries now. So when you hear that, it's a surprise sometimes. That is their system. So we're constantly trying to upgrade the system. But trust me, what is happening now under the PPP never happened under APNU. The open bidding process, the evaluation of bids, the documents there that we can supply, you think that ever happened there? They just called in people and give them the work. The strengthening of the procurement system has been major. But I would suggest you deal with Glenlal yourself, and don't, we have our own battle with him. He's becoming a politician, so I'll deal with him later. Yeah.
Just to follow up to the same question, Dr. Jagdeo.
Then then you will hear about all the sordid things that he has done.
In light of this special circumstances created around foreign companies and their finances and their number of different circumstances, does government see the need to look back at the public procurement process? Because of the fact sometimes it seems to be one of the things that stymie development. I think the process has come from a past time where funds were tight and everything else. Do you see the need to adjust it maybe upward or downward to suit the new productive environment?
So clearly the need to do that, but it's a robust system. If you look at our Procurement Act, you look around the Caribbean, it should start with that. The Starbuck News should examine our act in relation to any country in this part of the world or in the Commonwealth, and compare the features of our act with any country. I worked on that Procurement Act a long time back. We used to do procurement in the period, the 28 years under APNU, without an act in place, where you were using some regulations from the 1950s and a few Secretary to the Treasury memoranda. No act. We put in place in that act the standard bidding regulations for standard bidding document, the right of appeal, the requirement that they publicize the awards, which they have not been doing with frequency and they need to do. The right to publicize the awards. They resort to the court if you're not happy with the appeal. We put in place the PPC, which even is a third layer, a constitutional layer to examine all of these processes. So we have a robust law. Half of the people who evaluate this have never read the act. That is why they don't even know the procurement system we have to go through, that are different for each, depending on the source of the capital. Like I just explained, if it's bilateral, it has to go through one process. If it's multilateral, it goes through another source. If it's from the Treasury, it's a third set of criteria that you have to use. I see people talk about procurement and they have no clue, including write about it. And so my point is that it's a robust system. We don't need to change the system. We need to get people to adhere to it. And sometimes we have corruptly, and it's true, we have some people corruptly trying to undermine the system so that they can get past with their illegalities. And that's what we have to now police the system better. And that's some of the things I'm saying. How in heaven's name would, in this KRS bid, how in heaven's name will you put in place a criterion that was discontinued a long time back, is not part of the standard bidding document? And the law says that if any agency wants to change the standard bidding document, they have to get the approval of the tender board, the MPTAB. It's a violation of the law. And then we get heat for it. But the good thing about it is that it ended up with the person who bid the lowest getting the work. So not like APNU. Sometimes, well, they didn't even go through bid, but they just call in somebody and give them to work. I have numerous instances of that. They just call in, you go to the office of the president with something, a little bag, and you emerge with big contracts. That is how it used to be. Right, but